Welcome to HipMojo, show 14. I'm your host, Ashkan Carvez-Rushan.
And I'm CT Moore, and this week we're going to be talking about explosive startups, the fate of advertising revenue models, and a whole bunch of other things in lightning round. So let's get started. So a couple years ago, Ash, you wrote a blog post about the 13 most explosive startups. What is an explosive startup?
Yeah, I pitched this. I pitched a follow-up, updated post to Eric Schoenfeld of TechCrunch, and he's like, "What on earth is an explosive startup? That doesn't sound very enticing." And I said, "Well, an explosive startup basically is a company that goes from zero to either massive consumer adoption, like a Twitter, or massive exit, excess of like $500 million more or less, within like 18 to 24 months." So really just catches on, goes viral, for lack of better words, and becomes part of, everyday life. And I picked 13. Don't know why I picked 13. I think I just 10. There was a few that would always get left out. And I had a few criteria. One was that it did not involve a download. So right off the bat, something like Skype or even Alexa, the famous toolbar, was out. I just felt like that was comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
I think that was mainly the main thing, that it was just like an internet startup that went gangbusters.
Completely web-based.
Yeah. So this was 2007, and there was 13.
And 4 years on the web is like an eternity.
It is.
A lot's changed. I was looking over the list last night, and some of them I was like, wow, really? These guys used to be explosive. But let's take a look at a few that still deserve to be there and a few that just seem like completely insane 4 years later.
Yeah, so we've learned our lesson when we look at a list of like 10 or even 13. We're not going to run down every one, because then we're looking at like a 15-minute segment. So what we're going to do is we're going to really just look at a couple on that list that should not be on the list anymore, a couple that still would be, and then we're going to sort of consider, hey, if we want to update it, how do we change the criteria, and then we'll publish the updated list soon. So believe it or not, on those who should no longer, I guess, be on the site, I had listed, let's start with one. I actually had listed Dig, which did really come out of nowhere, and obviously I would say that probably now Dig has lost a bit of its, thunder to Twitter.
It lost a lot of its thunder specifically to Reddit. When
yes.
the new site changes, the community got really pissed and they all mass exodus.
Yeah, so direct competition would have been Reddit. But I mean, if you take a look at just broadly, more in the more mainstream dimension, right, it would be, I think, less Reddit. I think people just use Twitter for the idea of digging a URL or
even
article,
a Facebook like.
Or even a Facebook like, yeah. Now, okay, so Dig, we would agree, would no longer be on the list.
Right.
Okay, this week, Kevin Rose ended up publishing like an iPad app that they had done for Dig that they never launched. So I'm just thinking, like, he must be sitting there with like a bottle in his hand going like, what could have been? Okay, so Dig is not on the list. Another company on the explosive startups that really came out of nowhere that should also not be on the list, I think, is Delicious.
Yeah, Yahoo was talking about closing them down.
They did, and then they sold it to the guys from YouTube. So
right.
Steve Chen and Chad Hurley bought it, and then they relaunched it, and it was a bit of a disaster upon a disaster. The thing, just a little footnote with Delicious, is like, I've said this on a previous show, when Yahoo bought Flickr, so image social network, and then they had Delicious tagging, they could have just basically taken those two things
and merged
them in, and then added video, and they would have had a mini YouTube on their site.
We've also talked about this before, how Yahoo is good at buying things, but really bad at following through on integrating them.
Well, actually, you know what's ironic? I was on Marcus Shen's Twitter feed recently. Why is he important? Because he's the corp dev guy at Yahoo. Why was I on his page? Because they recently bought an ad network, Interclick, that I always looked at because it was going to go public, and I always like to invest in ad networks because I think they're interesting. But anyway, so they bought Interclick, and I was like trying to get a sense of why. What's funny is not the Interclick story. It's they also bought, the name escapes my mind, so I'll include it in the lower third as when you actually watch the show. But they bought this sort of like TV guide-ish company, not studio now, like Info now or something.
About that, yeah.
And what's interesting is Marcus Shen said on his Twitter feed, look, like we actually did not integrate this into Yahoo. We left it alone, and it's doing really well. And he linked to an article on Fast Company that actually, for once, a like mainstream / techie publication, commending Yahoo instead of bashing Yahoo. So I actually think you're going to see a change where Yahoo will buy things and they might actually leave them alone a bit because they have not had that much success when they force feed the thing onto
I think
the
it's also the approach they take. They force feed you a Yahoo email address. Like, why do I need to go set up another email address just to have a Flickr account? It's kind of, it's retarded and it's bullish. But they don't really, like we just said, they don't really integrate features and functionality. Like for example, Delicious mixed with Flickr, throw in some video, they might have had something interesting there.
YouTube. Okay, speaking of another company, quickly, MySpace. Now, MySpace was at one point the fastest growing thing ever.
Right.
You know, I mean, Rupert Murdoch was like, I bought it for $600.
I was friends with Tom Anderson on MySpace.
Oh, yeah, same here. I felt very special and unique until I found out how that worked. Now, MySpace is not on the list. Quickly, and then we'll move to a couple that should be on the updated list. Does MySpace have any shot with specific media, Justin Timberlake? We won't use the obvious cliche.
I really doubt it. One, the model's kind of weak as far as I'm concerned, and two, there's just so much, I don't know, bad mojo around the brand. I don't think it can be revived.
It's ironic you bring up brand because when Tim Vanderhook, CEO of Specific Media, was on Bloomberg West talking about why they bought MySpace, he said because of the brand. And what's ironic is that Tom Anderson has come out and said, not Tom Anderson, Mike Jones, I believe, the former brief CEO during the end of the News Corp era, said, when we relaunched MySpace, we should have dropped the brand. So that's going to be a very interesting case study in marketing classes to see if the brand is an asset or a weakness. Let's shift gears and move, if you don't mind, to the ones that should be. Okay, so of the of the remaining 10, a few companies that I would definitely say would remain are YouTube. I don't think we need to. I actually had YouTube as #1 at the time because YouTube, again, I always point to this. They registered the URL in May of 2005, October of 2006. They're acquired for $1.65 billion. To me, that is like, hello, the gold standard, no questions asked. Facebook on the list, I think, was like 8 or 9 or 10.
But back then it was, I still think, still closed off to only students.
It's possible, but what's more interesting is Facebook is not really an overnight success. You know, it launched in 2004, it opened up, you know, now it's this dominant thing. I'm not sure if we update this list, it will be #1, #2, #3, because, I mean, as much as it kicks butt, it's not this dominant thing that grew overnight.
I think it's also too early to see just whether they'll remain explosive. Like, sure, they keep making a lot more money every year, but their yearly earnings don't even compare to Google's quarterly earnings.
Okay, so let's talk about, and that I think is made never, but let's now talk about a few companies that maybe, first of all, let's talk about the criteria if we update this list.
Okay.
Should we include companies that require a download and basically open up, let's say, Mozilla, Napster, Skype, Alexa?
Well, I think we have to because the web and mobile, they're not really, you can't really separate the two anymore. And let's face it, so many startups are focusing on mobile, and anything that's mobile requires that app download.
Okay.
So I think maybe we have to define download. Angry Birds, there you go. And
Angry Birds were, like Pandora, although very different platform, on their deathbed. Company going nowhere. And then thanks to, in both cases, the iPhone coming around, the company becomes, Pandora's worth like $2 billion now. Pandora was broke for 10 years. That's like the most, like if you're...
Still can't get them in Canada.
Well, there you go. So you got to move. Okay, now, so that's done. And then you would basically not draw a line between mobile and internet. If we update this list, it's free for all?
I think it should be, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to name you a few companies, thumbs up and thumbs down. Okay, you tell me. Would GroupMe, who basically launched at the Hackathon TechCrunch, and then within like a year they sell for $85 million to Microsoft. Would GroupMe make the list? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm going to say thumbs down just because they sold to Microsoft. I think that pretty much precludes a prosperous history-making future for them.
They're part of Skype, but that's ouch. Okay, Broadband.com, I excluded them, but I mean, that was Mark Cuban's baby. It went from 0 to $5.7 billion exit. Stock, he then used a straddle. A caller, sorry, and then he basically made his money even though Yahoo stock tanked. Would you include Broadband.com in the explosive startups?
No, I don't think I would just because, again, it's a branding thing. You know, it's not something that's going to be talked about in passing when people talk about the last 10 or 20 years of the web.
Well, it doesn't even exist. You type in Broadband.com,
exactly.
I think you go to, okay.
Yelp, interesting to say. I'm not sure. I thought Facebook Places was going to kill Yelp, even though Yelp was already working with Facebook. And Facebook backed off on the Places thing, but it's still a perfectly functional part of the site. But, you know, most top 10 explosive startups of all time, maybe not. Maybe top 25, but I'd have to see in a year or two.
A few more. Huffington Post.
No way. They're not, you know, yes, they're web-based, but they're just a publishing company.
No respect, these publishing companies. I just find it's very odd.
There's nothing wrong with that. I love publishing. I love content. You know, I would love to write for HuffPo, but like at the end of the day,
you ain't writing for HuffPo anymore after that put down. You won't be also as a Microsoft social media guy either, but that's fine. One more. off this list? Tell me if, okay, 2 more on this list.
All right.
3 more, sorry, quick yes or no's.
Make 'em
Mint.com, they win TechCrunch, they sell for 170 million to Quicken. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up.
Okay.
Provided they get their marketing going.
Okay, Groupon.
Groupon, thumbs down.
How, Groupon has to be like a top 3. Anyway,
let's talk in 365 days.
Okay, fair enough. Last one, Foursquare.
Foursquare, thumbs down.
Okay, very interesting. So I just want to finish off this first segment on this. An overnight success is the biggest oxymoron ever. There are no such things as overnight successes. I was thinking of like trying to think of a cutesy thing about overnight successes. I think like to you, another company's an overnight success because you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, and you're like, hey, overnight I found out about this success. But to the guys building the company, Foursquare, MySpace, YouTube,
right.
You know, I mean, these things take a lot of time. So
they sweat and breathe and eat it for 2 years before anyone hears about it.
Yep. So that's how we're going to take a short break. So basically, I have a lot of work to do as I update this list, but it will be done sooner than later.
We'd love to hear your comments.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions
on either the criteria or some nominees.
Yeah, you could actually tweet them at HipMojo. So and then we'll consider any and all. And it might be a top 25 because there's a lot on this list.
Yeah, I think top 10 is a little bit ambitious, and I'm even wary of trying to put them in orders of like 1 to 10 or 1 to 25.
That's what people want, the orders. That's when you get the death threats.
I'd feel comfortable naming a number 1 to 3, but beyond that, it's just kind of a free-for-all.
All right. We're going to take a short break and come back and ask whether advertising-only models are doomed.